This video is a continuation from the previous video. So when we're talking about visual grammar, vocabulary, and communication, we also have objects, but we also have relationships. Okay, so the objects are our elements, and the structures, the relationships, are our principles. And so whenever we place two or more objects in relation to one another, we automatically form a structure. If you put two words together, you form a sentence. You can even go back further and say if you put two letters together, you form a word. And so that is what you're looking at. Now, is there a difference? Let's start with letters and words. If we're putting together the letters A and M, there's a difference between AM and MA. That's their relationship. That's their structure. Okay? And then obviously as we add in more letters, we form more words, and the order matters. The relationship matters. Where this starts to become a terrible analogy is the fact that we're using this very linearly across the page like we do when we read. Because structures and relationships with principles and elements of design don't work that way. They don't form words that align in a sentence. I mean, they can, but they don't have to. We get to break beyond that structure. So one of the things we want to start to think about and get away from that kind of analogy is that we have to recognize the pattern in order to describe the structure. Structures have lines that connect objects. Sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're invisible. And so these lines are axes along which the objects are arranged. And we use these a lot in the design of buildings. Structure lines, as I said, can be visible or invisible. They can be active or inactive. And with objects, they can also be abstract or concrete. And here is a beautiful example of a residence that works a lot with line. And some of the lines are visible. Some of the lines are invisible. Some of them are abstract and some of them are concrete. And let's look at some more examples here. Talk about what we're talking about by all those terms. So abstract structures. There are abstract structures at work in that cube of 9 dots. The boundaries of it are invisible and inactive. Therefore, this structure is considered abstract. The circles are arranged in a pattern. There is clearly a structure present, but the lines that define them are invisible. However, we can still see them in our minds if we look. And through the Gestalt principle of closure, we fill in what's missing to complete the picture. So one of the invisible lines are that if you go from the center of this circle to the center of this circle, they align perfectly. I can't do this with my cursor because it's like drawing with a potato. Okay, so we can connect the centers. We can also align the tangents across the top, the tangents along the side, the tangents on the bottom. And then these align in the center, and this aligns in the center. And so we have that structure, and it's invisible. It's completely invisible. So now, let's again consider this. And while, again, we have no lines visibly connecting the circles in the original image, we can imagine those lines that we just talked about. And then structural lines are not necessarily running through the center of the objects. We talked about what happens through the center, right? So we've got those vertical lines through the center, horizontal lines through the center, but we also have diagonal lines. Tilt your head to the left and then to the right, and you'll see that we also have diagonal right and diagonal left lines. And so when we do this, we begin to understand relationships between the elements. We have created something called pattern by taking our elements and laying it on this structure. The circles are a formal structure, on a formal structure. Okay, the objects are very evenly distributed. They're symmetrical. They're arranged on structural lines. And they are aligned not only horizontally and vertically, but also diagonally. Okay, so very rigid structure. Think grid paper. And I'm sure you all have, in geometry class, drawn on grid paper. The grid paper makes it very easy to work on at that invisible abstract structure, which you can then later transfer your design off the grid paper so that they go away. And here you see the grid separated from the pattern elements are on. Now, these are what we call active structures. We can see the lines. We can see the structure. And in every single one of those cases, the structures can be seen and they can be felt as part of the design, as part of the structure. As part of the design. Textures can be ornamental, random, mechanical, and we can classify them in the same way we classify abstract structures. They can be formal, informal, gradations, radiations, or spirals. A lot of different things. And let me show you an example. These are all formal. These are all on perfectly symmetrical grids, both horizontally, vertically, well, except for the last one, and diagonally. And the one on the end is a gradient, right? Because we're starting with a circle, but then we're slicing off the bottom, or we're shifting the circle down like a sun going below the horizon. And you've lost that structure. Okay, so this colorful series of donuts shows movement. Now, because Americans read left to right and top to bottom, to us, the average American, this stream of circles is going to flow from the left to the right. So let's just assume that our elements don't move. They can, and that our compositions are just very static. Now, and they can in things like film and video and animation. But in this case, we're going to look at static images on a page as we would a floor plan, for instance. So for those that are static, we are going to talk about the illusion of movement. So in order to convey the idea that an activity is taking place on the page, we have to create a sequence of objects or create the illusion of the activity through some static representation of it. And we're going to talk about how to achieve that in the next couple of examples. But it is very much achieved in this design of circles. And that could be conveyed into buildings or rooms or something that we would use in the design of a residence. And so these are all examples of actions that you can apply to your designs to create a feeling of movement and motion. And because you all can read, I'm not going to go through and read all of these. But I'm going to ask you to go through the PowerPoint, and I don't know what it is. I know the difference between its and its. A bunch of free typos here. Sorry, I will fix those elsewhere. Sorry. I see something, and if I don't fix it, I forget about it. I won't fix it. Okay, so for instance, let's talk about rotation. When an object moves around a point or axis, it rotates around that point or axis. The point or axis of rotation can be inside or outside the object. We saw this in a previous example where you saw a cube and the next cube rotated slightly as if tumbling forward, and then the next one rotated more as if it was continuing that illusion of rotation. And then if we put those on the corner of a book and flipped it so that we had a flip book animation, we would watch that cube rotate. And so that is what we're doing when we do an illusion. So say we have a building we've designed and the cube rotates, the plan rotates the floor points or the elements or towers or something. The building in plan would appear to have movement. And it would also appear to have movement once it was built. And that's what we're talking here. That's what we're talking about, these activities. Okay, so go through these and then see how you can apply them. And there's 3 pages of them. See how you can apply them. Whoops, all this got shifted somehow. Let's see if I can get it back in the... Why did it get shifted? I can move it back over so you guys can see it. I hope. There we go. There you go. Makes it easier that way. If not, I don't know what's going on with the background, but okay. I don't know what this is. It's not letting me pick it, but we're okay. We've got what we need. And so here are more, right? So, and you're going to start to see balance is going to be one of the principles we talk about a lot, space, but these are others. And so when I told you that there are multiple principles, multiple elements, but that we were going to focus on certain ones, well, these are some of the others, okay? And you see movement in this static image. You know that waves move. So this graphic design, this pattern has been created that gives the illusion of movement. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about that illusion. It's in this case, flow. And again, what happened here? Get it back on the page, maybe. Sorry about this. It happens sometimes, and now it's not letting me get over there. There we go. So make sure you guys can read this. Okay. And then there are even more, right? So there's a whole bunch of them. And we're going to dominance is another one we're going to get into a lot more, negative, positive. But this defines all these, and these give you recipes that you can apply to your design as you're working. Get familiar with them, start sketching, right? So for instance, go influence. I'm just going to randomly pick one. When an object's form appears to be altered by another object, the altered object has been influenced by the other object. Perfect example of that is the logo that we previously looked at of the panda. The black spaces appear to be cut out because of the white overlay. Sketch that. See how you could use that to sketch a design. And then you just do it with basic shapes. Use squares, circles. You can do, obviously abstract shapes if you want, but use basic shapes to, this is very strange. Maybe I didn't do that. I'm sorry. This is driving me nuts because it's appearing differently. Okay, well, and when you get in the PowerPoint, you'll have access to this. But go through and sketch these. And when you're doing that, like for instance, you say you're, I don't think I have something I can draw with. I was going to draw down here. That's the only bad thing about PowerPoint. Say I want to draw an example of that. I just sketch a circle and then sketch another circle over it and then use that, color that out, and then say equals and then the leftover shape. Things like that, just to start to play around with it visually, to get ideas of what it looks like, and then start thinking about how you can incorporate these in your design. These are excellent examples of things you can do because we work with static buildings. We work with static shapes. These will help you keep your buildings from feeling stale and stiff and motionless. Okay, so as just to kind of summarize this little area up, as designers, it's our job to communicate. Communication requires a language, and for us, it's visual. How can we communicate if we don't understand the language, at least to some degree? Right? In life, we can communicate through spoken word or gestures. In design, we are bound by visual language. And so what that means is that you will need to learn this language, these principles and elements of design, and to get good at them like you would if, say, you were deciding you were going to learn to speak Spanish, you would have to practice. And that's what I want to ask you to do in your notebooks. Start sketching, start practicing, and start learning these. And eventually your conscious brain will see it enough that your unconscious brain will make it permanent, and then it'll be like riding a bike. It'll something you'll do unconsciously without a lot of effort or a lot of energy or a lot of thought. Okay? See you in the next video.